Hello and welcome to Connect. I'm your host, Randy Shabilo. On today's show, we'll have Jacqui Fleury talking about women's health and menopause, as well as Greg Sparrow from Vintage Iron Cycles. As always, we'd like to connect with you. Follow us on Facebook at ConnectYXE, catch past interviews on YouTube, email us at connectyxe@gmail.com, or leave a message at 306-665-3796. In the spirit of this show, keeping consistent with good news, and that is women's health and people working with women's health, we have Dr. Jacqui Fleury with us today, and she's going to shed a little bit of light into something that she spent over a quarter century working on, and women's health in particular. Thank you so much for coming down.
Thanks for having me, Randy.
I want to talk a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in the profession and how that led to women's health in your career.
Well, I have worked in women's health from day one. I think since I graduated, I joined a practice early on in Calgary with two doctors, naturopathic doctors there, who were already working in women's health and menopause. So I was young at the time, and I basically learned by some of the best at that point. And then as I relocated to Saskatoon and started my practice here, as my family grew, I moved my interest from, children's health to teenager health, but all along there was this consistent theme around women's health because women are more likely to seek care, first of all, and secondly, there are many more complexities with women's health than men's health. So as my practice evolved over the years, I came to realize that more and more women were struggling with the effects of hormone imbalances, seemingly. And then through that, I came to realize that there were many sort of root causes of hormone symptoms and hormone imbalances. And to that point, began to work on strategies, and in 2018, I wrote a book that illustrated the connection between how we feel mentally and emotionally and what's going on in our bodies physically. And from that point on, I've dialed it in even more specifically to focus on menopause. And again, that's partly related to my phase of life, but also women become very desperate to find help when they wake up one morning and they don't recognize themselves in the mirror.
I think that's the big takeaway that I've had from knowing you this last while, that there is an opportunity and there are avenues for women and their partners that do get affected ultimately. What are some key takeaways and symptoms that you can offer maybe the younger demographic and those working their way through menopause?
Well, I think the first thing to note is that menopause in and of itself is when a woman stops having a period. So when she hits that 1-year anniversary, she hasn't had a period in 1 year, she's officially in menopause. The challenge is that actual transition or that phase of life has become medicalized because so many women are symptomatic during that time. So it's for some women, it can be a very drastic change in hormones. But what I've come to realize after having worked in women's health and with women for many years is that menopause is actually an amplification of some underlying imbalances that have been there for many years that have gone unrecognized or undiagnosed. And so it's like you just throw a little bit of gas on some embers and you've got a fire. And so menopause can be a very, explosive time of a woman's life, which is illustrated if you Google the word menopause images, and it comes up with all sorts of cartoons of, men running for their lives and women hitting their partners over the head with frying pans and that sort of thing. So there's a stigma attached to the symptoms that accompany menopause, and women they're not having fun during that time either. So I think the message is that there are ways to work through the transition naturally without the use of medications, because medications at best will work, but oftentimes don't address that underlying imbalance that's been there for many years.
You've mentioned, and I've heard you say that identifying it as a woman on your own, knowing when that might be happening, or are there symptoms? Does it happen like that, or does it kind of leapfrog into a full-blown state?
That's a really good question. Sometimes women will almost literally wake up one morning and feel like, they put on 10 pounds around their waist overnight, and, they cry at the drop of a hat, and they, all of a sudden maybe their digestion is off and they feel inflamed and old. And so oftentimes that will happen fairly abruptly. And in other cases, women can sail through it free of symptoms. But if you know what to watch for and you know how to support yourself proactively going into your 40s, then you can oftentimes avoid a lot of what we see on the screen behind us, which is a whole list of symptoms that nobody really looks forward to. Like, nobody wants to feel like this, but oftentimes it hits them kind of unexpectedly, and at that point they're pretty desperate for help.
So it's not necessarily you're 42 years old or you're 51 years old. It can be varying depending on a whole host of health-related issues.
That's exactly it. So if you have a history of thyroid issues, or maybe you've had irritable bowel, or maybe you've been on a lot of other medications leading into your 40s, or you have a lot of stress, there are many predisposing factors that can create a perfect environment for you to be really symptomatic as you start skipping periods. And women will sometimes be skipping periods for years leading into menopause, or they'll start to notice drastic changes in like the flow of their period. Sometimes it gets really heavy. And so they're treating those symptoms leading into menopause. They may be on the birth control pill or various other strategies, but ultimately it becomes very urgent when they feel like they aren't coping, or that they can't control themselves, or like it puts stress on the relationship, it puts stress on the family, it can put stress on them in their professional lives. I've had clients who are having 10 or 15 hot flashes an hour and they can't focus. They're just drenching their clothes and have to bring changes of clothes to work, and then within weeks we see resolve of those symptoms. So yeah, there's a lot of hope for women.
You touched on the relationship item, and I think that's important because the women aren't alone if they're in a relationship. Can you allude to some facts that maybe others have shared with you that, or maybe read about, that you're not alone in that relationship, that there's a partner that's also affected? And is there any advice for partners that may be watching that could assist the women who's going through that period?
That's a great question. And I think when we talk about the stigma of menopause, I think men, when they hear the word, at best, they maybe know a little bit about it or have watched their mom go through it, or, a family member.
Don't want to know about it.
Exactly, and they do want to know more about it, because it's a very confusing time. And if the woman herself doesn't know what's going on, then it just makes it even harder on the partner and oftentimes on the kids. So I think education is the key. So if women understand why they're feeling the way they feel, they can then explain to their partners, this is what's going on for me, rather than, the Rod Stewart article where his wife was throwing utensils at him. And he basically said, we just gave her a hug. So she probably needed more than a hug in that moment. But anyway, it's about educating yourself that there is more at play here than just hormones.
And it's not necessarily black and white. You mentioned that there's maybe underlying issues. Is there anything that you can offer to premenopausal women that they could be prepared for, or getting ready, or have some sense of awareness and take some health measures proactively?
Absolutely, and that is my number one goal, is around the education for the woman who may be in menopause, but also if she is a mom, if she's got daughters or sisters, or she's an auntie, is being able to set to be an example of how you can take care of yourself, because self-care is going to be really important in your 40s to prevent the symptoms from amplifying during entering menopause. So lifestyle is really important, but again, knowing exactly which aspects of the lifestyle are going to contribute to hormone health going into your 50s. There's certain key elements that need to be addressed. And so I think that there's a lot of fluffy information out there, like eat well and exercise and get good rest, but women need more specific strategies than that, because that is not enough when they're hitting menopause.
So is there any takeaway that we can offer anyone watching that would say, if this is happening, you should do this? Or is it just simply a matter of seeing a physician and someone like yourself who can maybe walk them through and put flags up and say, these are the reasons why you're acting, behaving, feeling like you are?
I think the key is that I want women to understand the underlying factors that contribute to the whole collection of symptoms that they feel. Everything from the brain fog to the mood swings, the digestive disturbances, the changes in your skin, the changes in your weight. Women, I think once you give them an understanding of what's going on with their bodies, I think that they have an easier time committing to change and committing to the resources and the opportunities to feel better. I think there's so much information, some that's accurate, some that is almost patronizing to the woman, and I think women are very smart. They're seeking good information on how best to support themselves. So I think just finding the right information, finding the right guide or the right health coach or doctor who knows specifically what is going on with these situations.
I think that's the biggest takeaway that I've had from you this last while, is to understand that it's normal and everyone is going to be dealing with it at some point, different ways perhaps. But if someone did want to reach out to you, what would be the best way to get a hold of you or find out something about what you're offering?
Well, they can always reach me at the clinic at True Potential Health Services. They can also reach out through my website, and I also love to talk about this in groups, so I would happily come in and do lunch and learns, or I could do presentations where we could actually gather as a group. And I think women are stronger when they understand that they're not alone, and oftentimes when you bring women together and they can share stories together, they understand that this is a natural transition, and 40% of women are going to be postmenopausal. Like it is a really, like, worldwide, women are living longer, and so it's like you hit menopause and you kind of get through the rocky periods, and then what? Like, what sort of resources are available to women to maintain a healthy and vibrant life in the second half of their life? So that's what I'm passionate about.
I'm really relieved and encouraged by what you're saying and sharing, and thank you so much for being there for a lot of us that have witnessed it firsthand and heard about it. So appreciate you coming in, and we'll look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks, Randy. Thanks for having me.
Stay with us, folks. We'll be right back.